Quick question. Do you know what sprites are? No? Okay, listen. In basic, sprites are 2D images that we can use in our Unity projects. Sprites can be used in both 2D and 3D projects, and they are often the simplest way to add 2D visuals like icons, effects, and other elements into a game. Basically, I think sprites are pretty cool, and in this video I'm gonna show you guys how to put them, how to use sprites in your project. In the future, we're gonna get into sprites in more detail, but for now, I'm just gonna show you how to do the basics. Currently, in our scene, in our Unity project, both our enemy objects and our player object is represented by a cube. Instead of that, I want to change them into sprites. You can see that I got two sprites with me. I downloaded them off a website, off a free website, and I just recolored them a little bit, played around with them. But anyway, let me open this. In this video, we're gonna use this sprite and this one. In the description, I'm gonna leave links for how you can get these two recolored sprites, and in addition to that, I'll also leave a link for the original page where you can download the original sprites if you want that. But anyway, onto our Unity editor. Anyway, as I said in the presentation, both our player character and our enemy object are cubes, simple cubes. In order to start turning them into sprites, we need to first create a new folder, a sprites folder. Then we're going to get to our folder right here, to where we store our two PNGs, and we're going to drag these into our sprites folder. Now keep in mind that we need these images to be PNGs. Dragging them here. There we go. Now, right now these are just images. If we want Unity to recognize these as sprites, we need to make a few adjustments. First, let's turn our player image into a sprite by clicking on it, and in its inspector window, we're gonna see texture type. What will this texture be used for? Right now, it's set to default. Instead of that, we will set it to sprite, 2D and UI. Then, once this sprite mode segment pops up, we're going to go to pixels per unit. Actually, not that. We're going to go to sprite mode, and instead of multiple, which is the default, we're going to set it to single. Now, after doing those adjustments, we're just gonna go down here and click apply. Let's do the same with our enemy PNG and turn it into a sprite. Cool. Now we need to assign these two sprites to our enemy and player objects. Let's start with our player. We will be doing this adjustment by removing some of our player objects components and adding a new one. We're going to be removing cube mesh filter or player objects mesh filter and its mesh renderer. And instead of those, we're gonna add a component named Sprites renderer. In our Sprites renderer, you can see a slot called Sprite. This is where we're gonna put our sprite image, what you wanna call it. So let's do just that by clicking on our player sprite and dragging it into our sprite slot. Now you can see that even though our project is a 3D project, our sprite is a 2D image. And because of the way it's set right now, our camera cannot see it. Our camera, which is up in the air. We're gonna fix this by rotating our sprite. We can change these later if we run into an issue, but I think for now all we need to do is change its X rotation to 90 degrees and then change its Y rotation to 180 degrees. There you go. Now you can see that our camera can see our sprite. Now let's do the same with our enemy object. Going to our prefab folder, to our enemy, we're gonna delete both the mesh filter and the mesh renderer. And in their place, we're gonna add a sprite renderer. Putting the sprite in the sprite slot, we're gonna then rotate our enemy. I think just rotating its x-axis is enough. At least I think so. Right now we are done with the visual parts, but we still need to make a few adjustments to our code now. To give you a demonstration, let's test our game real quick to see if it will work properly without any adjustments to our code. The shooting still works, but right now... Ooh, what the hell? But anyway, we got to do some coding to adjust our scripts in order to make the game flow more adjustable to our 2D sprites. Yeah, let's go with that. But anyway, let's start with what's the problem with our enemy objects. We added a rotation to our enemy prefab, with its X rotation being 90 degrees. But once we go back and test our game again, you can see that all of our enemies are not rotated at all, with its X rotation being 0 instead of 90 degrees, just like we want. And that's caused by how we spawn them in our code. For more detail, let's go to our enemy manager script. Our problem is with this code. It is with this line right here, specifically with quaternion identity. Now, quaternion identity means no rotation. So every time we spawn an enemy, Unity resets its rotation to the default, which is 0, 0, and 0. This naturally overrides the rotation we set up in the prefab. So instead of writing quaternion identity, instead we're gonna write enemy prefab transform rotation, so that we can pass in the prefab's rotation instead of quaternion identity. Let's save this real quick and go back to our editor to test it. There, as simple as that. Right now, if we click on our enemy clones, enemy objects, you can see that right now their X rotation is 90 degrees, just like we set up. Now to the problem with our player character. Since our player is now a 2D... Oops. Anyway, Since our player is now basically a 2D sprite, the only rotation we need is through the y-axis, not the x or the z-axis. But the way we wrote our rotation method, right now when our player rotates towards the cursor position, all three of its rotation values are changed. Let me give a demonstration. You can see that all three of our player objects' rotations are changing. And we don't want that. Instead, we only want our player's Y rotation to change. To do that, we need to adjust our player behavior script and make it so hand rotation only changes our player object's Y rotation, not our player object's X or Z rotation. We're gonna make our changes with just one new line of code. We already set up our target rotation right here, but instead of doing anything with that, first we're gonna adjust it. Let's do that by writing target rotation equals to quaternion Euler. Now first we're gonna give it X rotation, which we want it to be 90 degrees. So we're just gonna write 90. Then our Y rotation. We don't want any changes to that. So for the Y rotation, we're just gonna write target rotation dot Euler angles dot Y. And for Z, we want Z to be 0. That's it. Now let's go back to our editor and test this again. It's semi-working, but we need to flip our player objects sprites, or enemies glitch out again. I think we can do that by going to our player objects, to its sprite renderer, and simply flip the Y rotation of its sprite. Let's test this again. And there it is. Right now our game has sprites instead of cubes.